Hi guys, today I'm finally going to do that What's on My Kindle video that I've announced a few times already on this channel. A video where I show you all the unread books on my Kindle, so basically like a book haul. But before I do so, we need to talk. And I don't mean you and me specifically, but me and the ebook industry. And I'm doing this A, because I'd like to vent my frustration, and B, because it might be of interest to other people who might otherwise go into this whole ebook business as naively as I did. So first of all, I love having an ebook reader. I like how small it is, I like how comfortable it is to read in bed. I like how light it is so that I can take it everywhere with me, even hiking, and I still have a whole library with me. I love how I've already read a few books and authors whom I might otherwise never have tried, and or who wouldn't have been accessible to me in the first place. However, I think there is a huge problem with ebooks, and it doesn't have anything to do with the reading experience or the way we read and consume a text. But the huge problem that I have with ebooks is to do with the politics of ebook selling. So when I decided to finally buy an e-reader late in 2018, I chose the Kindle because it seemed to me to be a high-quality device, and I've never heard anything to the contrary, and I'm perfectly happy with my Kindle. And I figured, well, having a Kindle doesn't necessarily mean that I have to buy all my ebooks via Amazon, right? Yeah. And that's after I bought the Kindle, that's when I discovered digital rights management, DRM. DRM are restrictions that publishers put on ebook files to prevent misuse, like copying and distribution, so piracy. What that brings with it is that when you acquire an ebook with DRM on it, it effectively means that you are not acquiring full ownership rights of the file. You can't do with it whatever you want, or whatever you could do with a file that you own, or a book that you own. You are effectively only acquiring the license to read the book as opposed to acquiring the book itself. And with that license, you can read the ebook on a registered device. Among the things that you can't do with a file is that you can't easily and legally edit it, like convert it to a different format. Now, the Kindle comes with its own file format. So if I buy an EPUB file that has DRM on it, it's effectively useless for me because I can't convert it to a file format that the Kindle can read. That means I can't buy ebooks in the online shops of my local bookshops. And in Germany, in addition to that, our German libraries don't offer ebook files in the Kindle format. So this whole branch of the library sector is closed off to me. Conversely, there is DRM on every ebook that you buy on Amazon, which again, you can't easily and legally convert to the EPUB format. So once you've started building a library with books that you've bought on Amazon, ebooks that you've bought on Amazon, you are bound for forever to using a Kindle if you want to keep having access to these books and you don't fancy reading books on the Kindle app on a backlit screen. Unfortunately, putting DRM on ebook files is totally the norm in the publishing industry. I can think of only two publishers that don't practice it, and they are Tor and Simon & Schuster. If you know any others, please let me know. Since I avoid using Amazon as much as possible, in the beginning I thought twice about every ebook purchase, and I tried every other option first, second-hand books and also even new books. And I still buy books from Tor and Simon & Schuster on other platforms like my local bookshops, online stores. But in the case of all other books, my attitude has changed. Because you know what? It's not Amazon, or not just Amazon, that's screwing up the market with this kind of behavior. It's the publishing houses' fault too. And I don't see why I should make my life unnecessarily uncomfortable just because publishers behave in this kind of way and preemptively treat me and all other customers like criminals. And while they themselves only pretend to sell me the product, while in reality they're just selling me stupid licenses. So it's them, among other things, that drive people into the arms of Amazon. And I'm so pissed off by that I'm not even sorry and I don't even care anymore. So there. So rant over, but I hope this has been a bit illuminating of the situation for people who haven't yet bought an ebook reader or thinking about buying an ebook reader and wondering which to get. But onto the books now. So it's a certain kind of book that I buy in ebook format, generally speaking. It's books that I think will be quick reads and easy reads, kind of comfort reads. It's books that I think won't require too much attention, because I tend to read ebooks more superficially. I don't usually buy books in ebook format that you would find in the general fiction section of the bookshop, and also not genre fiction that I think will be something special. But of course, there are always exceptions to the rules, and sometimes a deal is just too good to ignore, and sometimes books aren't easily available to me in physical form. So there is actually a bit of general fiction on my Kindle, and even some non-fiction, which I definitely usually prefer to read in physical form. I'm going to read from the Kindle app on my phone because it's easier to navigate. So I have Half of a Yellow Sun by Chimamanda Adichie, the big Nigerian Civil War drama, which, if I remember correctly, I bought for 99 cents. So how can you say no to that? And I also have Augustown by Kei Miller, a Jamaican author. And this is a novel about Jamaica, about modern contemporary life in Jamaica, but also going back to the beginnings of the Rastafari movement. And this one was hard to get in physical form. It would have taken at least a few weeks to arrive had I ordered it. And I think it wasn't even certain if it could be delivered. So I bought it on ebook just to make sure I got it. And on the non-fiction front, we have Out of Thin Air by Anthony Adeane, which is a true crime book about a murder in Iceland that most likely wasn't one, even though people confessed to the crime. And if I understand it correctly, it's also a social and economic history of modern Iceland. And my second non-fiction book is The Arsonist by Chloe Hooper, which is about the bushfires in Victoria in Australia in 2009. So on one February day in 2009, that became known as the Black Saturday, 150 individual fires were burning in the Victorian bush. Most of them, in most of the cases, the cause for them was probably arson. But I think the arsonist of the title of this book is the only one that was actually arrested for lighting just 2 of those fires. I've actually started reading this book. I'm about 20% in, and paradoxically, it is absolutely chilling to read and beautifully written and very informative. And then going into historical fiction, I have The Seeker by S.G. McNeill, who I discovered only last week or so. I've actually been following for months now on Instagram. I didn't know she was the author of this book or an author of historical fiction at all. Beautiful Instagram account though, I'll link it below. The Seeker is set at the time of the regime of Oliver Cromwell and is a spy novel about an intelligence agent in London who is working for Oliver Cromwell. And I think he gets conflicted morally about whether or not working for his employer is actually the morally right thing to do. And then we have Ross Poldark by Winston Graham, the first book in the Poldark series. This is one of the books that I would have preferred to buy and read in physical form, because it just seems like such a cozy read, and having a book is still cozier than holding an e-reader, I think. But Ross Poldark is a young soldier who returns to England from the American War of Independence and has to start his life again more or less from scratch there. Among other things, he has lost his fiancée, and with that, the whole future that he had planned for himself, and he has now to begin again. And then we have As Meat Loves Sword by Sarah McGann, which is again set in Oliver Cromwell's time, about a young man who joins Oliver Cromwell's new model army with very idealistic expectations. Unfortunately, this young man is a total anti-hero. I've actually read 10 to 15%, and in some ways it has me intrigued because of this young man's being such an anti-hero. He's a very troubled, very violent man. But it also has all those cliched hallmarks of historical fiction set in early modern times and in the Middle Ages. And that had me a bit exasperated, so I put it down again a few months ago. So that's it for historical fiction. Next up is crime fiction, and here we have Red Bones by Ann Cleeves. This is book 3 in the Shetland series, a series of crime novels and police procedurals set on Shetland. The first book in this series, Raven Black, I absolutely loved. It's so atmospheric. It's set in midwinter, so there's snow everywhere. And the murder mystery was quite intriguing, and I also loved the dynamics of island society and island small town society on Shetland. Book 2 was so-so, but I'm definitely going to continue with the series. I like all the main characters too. And then there's Bitter Wash Street by Garry Disher. This is the first book in a series of police procedurals set in Australia in the bush of Victoria of New South Wales. I don't remember, I'm sorry. In any case, it's set in the bush, in a small town, and I've recently had a very negative reading experience with another Australian crime novel set in the Victorian bush, which was Scrublands by Chris Hammer, which was quite awful. I'm going to talk about it soon. And maybe in the same video I'm going to talk about Bitter Wash Street as well, because I kind of need a palate cleanser after that. This book, by the way, was also published under the title Hell to Pay, which I'm guessing is the international title, and Bitter Wash Road is the original Australian title, just because it's more cryptic. And I also have The Unexpected Inheritance of Inspector Chopra by Vaseem Khan, which is the first book in the Baby Ganesh Agency series. This series is set in Mumbai, and it is about a police detective who retires and then takes over and inherits a private investigator agency, which comes with this baby elephant, which they call Ganesh, and that's why it's called the Baby Ganesh Agency. Vaseem Khan isn't actually an Indian author. He was born and grew up in London. But it's the next best thing because at least I figure he is familiar with both the language and the customs of India and has been to Mumbai a number of times, I expect. So the next best thing to an Indian crime novel by an Indian author. I didn't know that when I bought the book, and when I became interested in the book, I just assumed that he was an Indian author, but he is not. And then I have I Let You Go by Clare Mackintosh, which is more thriller than crime novel, definitely not police procedural. This is about a woman whose young son was killed in an accident a few years before. Or was it an accident? My next group is Fantasy, A Stranger in Olondria by Sofia Samatar. And this is a fantasy without a lot of magic, I think, or even any magic whatsoever, but I'm not sure. But it is set in a world that is inspired by or modeled on late medieval, early modern Oriental countries like the Levant, I guess. It's supposed to be a beautifully written story. I'm not sure about that, and I started to read this last September and I got a few pages in and I thought it started in the most boring manner imaginable, where the first person narrator was talking about his childhood just en bloc, like how he grew up in this big house with a father who was distant at best and abusive towards his younger brother at worst, and blah blah blah. It was just not broken off into chunks and interspersed with action of some other kind. It was just this huge narration. It felt like I'd been reading for a billion pages and I still didn't have the first clue what the actual story in the present was going to be about. So it didn't exactly catch my attention, so it went to the bottom of my to-read pile. And 12 Kings in Sharakhai by Beaulieu. This is an American publication. I think that in the UK it was published under just the title 12 Kings, which is a bit unfortunate, I think, because in my opinion the name Sharakhai is the most intriguing thing about the title. Anyway, this sounds like quite a formulaic fantasy storyline, which nonetheless often ends up being quite a good story. It's about a young woman who decides that she has had enough, and although she's just one of the ordinary people, she ends up shaking the foundations of the whole kingdom. And Into the Drowning Deep by Mira, which is a pen name of Seanan McGuire's. This is about, it's a horror story about killer mermaids in the deep sea. And going into science fiction, or at least going into space, Ninefox Gambit by Yoon Lee. This was all the rage on BookTube and the bookish internet last year, and I started reading it in autumn, but wasn't in a quite patient enough mood for it back then. And this is about a repressive space empire whose rulers or whose government faces some opposition because they might not be the good guys that they think they are. Aurora by Kim Stanley Robertson. I don't know much more about it anymore at this point than that it is a generation ship story. So a story about a spaceship on a long, decades long, if not centuries long journey to find another home planet. And it's supposed to be hard science fiction. That is not exactly the case with Space Opera by Catherynne M. Valenti. This is a first contact story, essentially, where aliens come to Earth and inform humanity that they have to send a delegation to the Metagalactic Grand Prix, where they have to perform and not make the last place, in order to prove that their civilization is worth saving. Otherwise, the planet will be destroyed. This is, of course, inspired by the Eurovision Song Contest, which used to be called the Grand Prix de l'Eurovision de la Chanson. But, of course, we didn't shoot the losers or anything. And with that, we have finally arrived at romances. Perfect Day by Sally Malcolm. This is a modern day retelling of Jane Austen's Persuasion. And The Last Kiss, also by Sally Malcolm. I hope she's good. This is set just after the First World War and is about two soldiers who had a love affair in the trenches and have now to see whether it can survive the war and it can survive in civilian life. And Seven Summer Nights by Harper Fox is set just after the Second World War. And two soldiers or two people who were somehow involved in the war and or affected by events during the war are dealing or trying to deal with events and experiences of the recent past. Yes, I like them angsty, but one that's not really very angsty, I think, is Dash and Dingo by Cat Ford and Sean Kennedy. This is about an English naturalist. This is set around the year 1900, and it's about an English naturalist who is trying to find the vanishing Tasmanian tiger and gets help from an Australian ranger or whatever the corresponding Australian term is. This sounds quite funny, a bit Indiana Jonesy. Gay Indiana Jones, I think. So these are all the unread books on my Kindle. Quite a colorful batch, I think. Colorful little library. As always, I'd love to hear if you've read any of these books, what you thought about them, or if I've made you curious about any of them, or just in general. Talk to me. I'll see you again very soon. Bye.